In 2002, a prominent Melbourne couple in the society scene went missing.
Okay.
The woman had 5 children and her new husband, their stepfather, they'd been together for about 20 years. There was no reason anyone could tell for why these two went missing. They were very rich, quite well known, but there was no ransom money asked for, nothing eliciting any suspicion as to why they would have disappeared off the face of the earth. The children are obviously devastated, but they have no idea how much more devastated they're going to become when they find out what happened to their mum and stepdad. This, Sammy, is the story dubbed by the newspapers as the Melbourne Society Murders.
Oh, my God. I'm excited. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Not Another Crime Podcast.
I'm Georgia Love.
I'm Sammy Peterson.
I'm a journalist.
I am not.
But what you are is wearing pyjamas.
I am wearing pyjamas, and I'll tell you why. Because I hurt my neck because I'm a 33-year-old man, and I just woke up this morning. And I had put my neck out, and I could not get changed this morning. I could not get changed. I just had a run of great gigs this week and had such a lovely time. And then you just woke up this morning and I was like, oh no. And poor Diggs was so excited this morning just to get up with Dad in the morning, and he just was so excited to go for a walk.
Oh, no.
But he's a big boy and he really does pull the lead, and I could not get shoes on. So I'm just like walking out. It was like raining. I'm like walking out in the cold and bare feet because I can't get shoes on.
God.
And I'm trying not to fall down any stairs because Diggs really likes to pull. Really likes to pull. So you know what? I didn't fall down anything, but I am wearing pajama pants because I could not get anything else on today.
Hey, that is so fine by me. Pajamas are always welcome in my company.
Thank you so much
and
for saying
I've
that.
been in my pajamas literally all week. Because as you know, dear listeners, if you listened to last week's episode, I was not there because I had the goddamn flu.
You had the goddamn flu.
And I'm going to do my pet peeve up the top today.
Okay.
Because a massive pet peeve of mine is when people have a cold and they say, I've got the flu. No, I had actual influenza.
Yeah.
And
you're really sick.
I thought I was dying. I really, for a good 24 hours, I thought either I am dying or I may as well.
Yeah.
Because I feel so awful. I cannot go on anymore, which is not over dramatic at all. And I will hear none of that. Thank you very much.
Well, I picked you up from the airport on Sunday and you were so sick. Great company though. You got in the car and just fell asleep.
But it was so wonderful picking me up. You came and picked me up so we could come straight here and do podcasting afterwards, record a couple of episodes, and I got in the car and I was like, hi, I'm not well.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, okay. How was Brisbane? I was like, I'm not well. Don't talk to me. And I slept the whole drive. And then obviously we did not record a podcast because I was dying.
Because you were dying. But we did have I called Genevieve Morris and Tony Martin, and we did a great episode last week with Martha Stewart. And I found out just after we'd finished recording that Martha Stewart was in Australia for Vivid.
What?
For the Sydney Festival. Yeah.
While you were talking about her?
Yeah. How weird is that?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
See, that's why you need a journalist on the episode.
That's why you need a journalist.
I loved that episode so much, and thank you so much, Tony and Jen, for stepping in. Just like, what beautiful friends. Said, I was our listeners are gorgeous. They're horrendous people.
Yeah.
They will understand if we don't have an episode out. I will just have to say, Georgia is dying and she recovered.
Yeah.
But you are a greater worker than me, than I, and you turned around and said, no, I'll call in some backup. And the backup was goddamn Tony Martin and Genevieve Morris. So for any of our overseas
heavy artillery.
listeners, for any of our overseas listeners, Tony Martin and Genevieve Morris are absolute comedy legends of Australia.
Yeah.
They've done countless TV shows, comedy shows between them. Tony's done radio forever. They're two absolute legends.
Good. Yeah.
So I did get a few messages on Monday morning going, oh my God, what? You're too sick to meet Tony Martin and Genevieve Morris? That's so unfair. And I selfishly absolutely loved getting to sit back and listen to an episode just as our horrendous listeners do.
I know.
On my podcast app, I listened to the episode and I loved it.
Oh, it was so much fun. But I will say as well, if you want to skip ahead, it's probably too late to say this. If you want to skip ahead, you can skip ahead and just listen to the story if you want to do that as well. And I will say real quickly, we are getting so many emails at the moment. We're getting so many voicemails as well. So if you do want to leave us a voicemail or an email, you can write into sammy@justanothercompany.com.au, or you can leave a voice note, which is a speak pipe. All the links are in the show notes.
And also in our Instagram bio.
That's right. So people can follow us, can they?
They can. We're at Not Another Crime Podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
And we also have a YouTube. Holy hell. If you'd rather watch us, you can now watch us on youtube.com as well.
We're
if you want to do
having a lovely sparkling wine.
a lovely
Cheers.
sparkling wine. I'm trying not to move my neck.
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Imagine if I pulled my neck cheersing someone.
Yeah, that's a me.
Such an auntie vibe.
Yeah, exactly. That's my kind of injury.
I'm also doing my final show on my tour this week in Brisbane.
Oh
How fun's that? So
I was in Brisbane last week and you're in Brisbane this week.
I know.
I will pick you up from the airport.
Thank you so much for saying that.
No, I will.
I'll just fall asleep.
I will. And I've put it on the podcast now, so I have to.
Yeah, okay. No, I'll just
I
fall
will
asleep.
do that for you.
I'll just fall asleep and not talk to you. Okay. How was Brisbane?
I'm sorry, I was so sick.
Now, we'll be doing the mailbag section at the end of this podcast because we do have quite a lot of lovely voicemails, and I keep calling them different things every time. Voicemails, voice note, whatever, Trevor.
Textual. Oral textuals.
Oral text, that's lovely. Oral textuals.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say as well that we did a wonderful episode of this podcast, a Thursday treat, with Oliver Clark recently.
We did.
And it was so much funny. So much funny. It was so much funny. That was so much funny. It was so much fun and we had a great time. We did Democracy Manifest.
Yes.
The story of Jack Carlson. And we were having a great time. And Oliver said to me while we were there, he said, "Oh my God, today I thought you were going to do the Winnebago Man." And I was like, what's the Winnebago Man? You didn't know what the Winnebago Man was.
Never heard of the Winnebago Man.
And I was like,
I've never heard of Ed Gein, so again, I've got no credibility.
And Oliver was like, oh, you have to do the Winnebago Man. I'm surprised you haven't done the Winnebago Man before. And I was like, God, okay, right. So I wrote the Winnebago Man down on my notes app where I put my story suggestions that I'm going to do. And then I check with you and make sure you're not doing it because you might have been doing the Winnebago Man.
I wasn't.
Well, thank God for that, because I sat down to watch the Winnebago Man documentary. I had my laptop open. I had notes ready. I had a glass of wine there. I had my feet up, candle lit. I was like, wow. This is how I write everything.
Sorbeline and box of tissues out next to you.
That's all right.
Sorry. I don't know why I said that. That was so gross.
So gross. Yes, Georgia, that's exactly what I have when I watch the Winnebago Man. Watch any documentary, always have Sorbeline out. But yeah, so I'm like, I've got my laptop open, I'm ready to write, and it starts slow. It's about a man who went viral, basically. He just swore heaps selling Winnebagos. That's what it is. It's like a blooper out, like a bit of
ad.
Of an ad. So it was a guy selling Winnebagos, and he just kept swearing and shouting and getting really angry about it. So I just kept watching it going, okay, well, soon we'll get to the crime. So I keep watching, and I've got my notes ready, and I'm just sitting there. And I kind of just start to, after a while, half an hour's passed, and I'm just kind of just waiting still and just thinking. If Oliver suggested this, it's going, the hook here, the twist here is going to be quite intense, and I will just have to keep watching. So it gets to the hour mark, Jenny.
And what has happened in this documentary so far?
Nothing.
What's the documentary about?
It's about a guy who did Winnebago commercials. He was really angry. It was a viral video before viral videos, so it was passed around on videotapes everywhere. He was the guy that they loved because he just kept swearing and yelling and everything, and no one knows what happened to him. So, they go and track him down. That's what they track him down.
And that's what the documentary
is. Yeah, and he's living on a farm. That's as interesting as it gets. And then
what? It's discovered that he's a murderer or something.
No. So nothing crime-related happens at all, and I watched the whole thing, and then I rewound half an hour of it. Because I was like, there's no way Oliver has just told me to watch this thing and it's got nothing to do with crime at all. So I messaged Oliver and I said, hey, you suggested the Winnebago Man as a story. There is no crime involved. And he wrote back, isn't your podcast called Not Another Crime Podcast? And I said, yes, but it has to involve a crime. And he said, I don't understand. Now, this was Oliver who came on the podcast, did not remember that he did the theme music. And then he suggested this. Holy hell. Listeners, we love getting your suggestions for stories. Don't lead me down a goddamn rabbit hole like that. I listened to 2 podcasts about it after that. I was trying to figure out, was there a crime involved? There's not. There's a man who swore heaps.
It's a documentary about a man who swore heaps
on an ad.
And he said...
I can't believe you haven't done it.
When he came to do his episode, he said, I thought today we might have been doing the Winnebago Man. What?
What are you talking about?
And when you asked, where's the crime? He said, isn't it called Not Another Crime Podcast?
Not another crime podcast.
It's not called Not a Crime Podcast.
Not a crime podcast. It's so funny. So Oliver has no idea still what this podcast is about, even when he rocked up to do it.
Oh, fuck, that's funny.
It's so funny.
We'll bring you the Winnebago Man another day, listeners.
We've been,
that's so funny.
We've got like some really exciting guests coming up. Like we're going to have the great John Ronson soon.
Oh
as
my
well.
God. Okay, no, we can't say that until it's actually locked in because I feel like that's not true.
It's going to have, but I said to you, so I sent a text to you the other day and it had a screenshot of my message to John and John was like, yep. It would be a delight. Can't wait to do it. And I said, he's doing the Winnebago Man.
We get John Ronson on, a famous author who has done a book called The Psychopath Test, but we're going to ask him to talk about the Winnebago Man.
Yeah, it'd be so funny. So funny. So, yeah,
Results of the test, Oliver Clark is a psychopath.
Please do keep recommending stories, but just make sure they have a crime in them somewhere.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Be great, so funny.
Winnebago Man.
We also heard from recently, released an episode about Daniel LaPlante, as they call the boy in the walls. And I heard from someone who actually went to school with Daniel LaPlante. What? Yeah, who said,
Another American listener
who said that they really liked the podcast episode, but there were a few inaccuracies because it's a really hard story to tell.
Okay, so that's so interesting because when you were telling it, you were saying as you were researching it, there were lots of like urban legends and myths and stuff involved.
And he said it was pretty close, but there were some little things that, and he goes, the story is even weirder than the one that you told.
Whoa.
So we have to get someone on. I've already spoken to a guy who's actually writing a book about Daniel LaPlante, and I reckon that'd be so great to have them on to kind of tell the full story for a Thursday treat sometime
our own
soon.
Fact-checking of our own episode. Maybe that's a hack to be able to double our episodes, is just tell something wrong and then come back and do the episode again later and tell it right.
Well, we do need to do that with the staircase because...
Yes, that's actually that is a good segue.
Yeah.
We have... decided to take down our episode about the staircase because for some unknown reason, you, me, and Rana Hussein all somehow did not realise we were saying the wrong name for the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator. And we put up a thing the next week saying that was so dumb of us. So sorry we didn't realise that, but we've realised we don't want to sound stupid. So we've taken that down and we will redo the staircase another time as like a full story. We'll go into it and we will not call the perpetrator Scott Peterson because that wasn't his name.
That's right. Yeah, but also we will be doing the Winnebago Man really soon, so stay tuned for the Winnebago Man. He just swears heaps.
You sitting there with your laptop open ready to take notes, just doing your work. What night
Pajama
of the week
pants
was it?
on. It was a Wednesday night.
Like I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do some work, and you just watched a documentary about a man that swore a lot.
There was a little night off. I didn't have a gig as well. I'm just sitting there, just wasted a whole night. Because also I was so disappointed and confused the whole time as well. Because it's like, but
and you would have been thinking like, this is going to be so interesting.
Yeah,
they tracked down this man. Yeah, and then what are they going to find out about him?
Yeah,
what's he done?
Yeah. What's he done?
No,
and then nothing. Even the last 10 minutes, I was like, what is...
I'd love to give a message to Oliver at this point, but we know he clearly doesn't listen, so I won't bother.
And also, Oliver, I did pay $8 for it, so just so you know that. Wasn't on any, it wasn't on any streaming services. So thank you, Oliver, for that. Waste of money and waste of time. Hey, Georgia, you ready to tell me a story this week?
Oh, yes, sorry. I do still have a lingering cough.
Yeah.
Or kouk.
Okay.
Which I think it's pronounced.
Yep, correct.
All right. Margaret Lord was born in Melbourne in 1963. She was
Great name.
Isn't it? Margaret,
Margaret
Lord.
Lord.
That's a great surname,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's so good, Lord.
Imagine if she went on to become if she got knighted, Lady Lord.
Oh, that would be very cool.
She was one of two girls born to a working class dad who was a truckie until he started his own road trucking and quarry business and made absolute bank.
Lynn Fox.
No.
Okay.
Not this time. But for anyone who is interested, the company he founded was called Victoria Roads Proprietary Limited, one of the biggest road contractors in the state of Victoria in the 1960s. And he also owned two quarries in Victoria and another in Western Australia. So they got rich quick.
Right,
like
okay.
New money, fast money, a lot of money.
Wow.
His daughters, Margaret, as we discussed earlier, and Diana, grew up wanting for nothing. They went to private boarding schools. They, lavish holidays all around the world. Margaret, who we're talking about today, went on to study a business degree.
Oh.
While studying, she met airline pilot Brian Wales. They date, and he spoke like this.
That's so much fun. Sound like a whale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice one.
Or this.
I don't like that as much. I'm
having fun today.
Yeah,
I'm having fun.
You're having a good time.
Okay. Brian and Mark, I think maybe the cold and flu meds are still doing their thing. Brian and Margaret dated for 4 years and then eventually got married just days after Margaret's 24th birthday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So young.
So young. Yeah, 24.
I feel like it used to be normal, but that's so young to be married now. They moved into Margaret's parents' house in Camberwell, Melbourne, because why wouldn't you if you have experience with a mansion in Camberwell? And the parents moved to a smaller place. They had, grown daughters now. They were downsizing, so they just gave the Camberwell mansion to Margaret and Paul and Brian. A year later, they had their first child, a daughter named Sally. That was in 1958. No? She clearly wasn't born in 1963 if she's had a daughter in 1958. Never mind. Then over the next decade had another 4 children, Damien, Emma, Prudence and Matthew. So 5 children to Brian and Margaret Wales.
Okay.
As well as the family home in Camberwell, they had a holiday home in Sorrento, Victoria, for our overseas listeners, not Sorrento, Italy.
No.
But almost as fancy.
Very fancy area though, Sorrento.
And having a holiday house in Sorrento is like the epitome of wealth in Melbourne.
Yep.
They lived that proper bougie Victorian society life.
Yep.
And with all of this, the marriage was happy until it wasn't. By the time Matthew was born, cracks started to show. So Matthew is the youngest of the 5 children.
Okay, right.
Cracks in the marriage started to show. Brian was away all the time, of course, because he's a commercial airline pilot. And Margaret now had 5 kids under 10 to look after on her own.
Yeah.
It was pretty tough.
Yeah.
One of the trips away that Brian took for work was to Brampton Island in 1968. And that's the year that Matthew, the youngest, was born.
Okay.
So Brampton Island was an island, I don't think it was part of the Whitsundays Islands, but it is just near the Whitsundays Islands.
Right, okay,
But there's no longer a resort on it, so it's now just a derelict place. Which also, I worked at an island in the Whitsundays called Lindeman Island.
Yeah.
The resort there is also closed, so it is also derelict right now. Just a little tidbit for
Derelict Islands.
Yes, I get called that a lot. It's what I call my boobs. I don't know.
I'm sure what you're on today.
Kids, don't do pseudoephedrine. It's been a week.
You've dropped some pseudoephedrine.
Oh my god. Okay. This trip that Brian took to Brampton Island, he struck up a friendship with a man who was also on holiday there named Paul King. They
Okay.
became like fierce, fast besties, and he was also from Melbourne. So when they both came back home, they were like, "Yeah, we're going to continue this friendship that we made in Brampton Island." So then, now he was home. Like as I said before, Margaret was always kind of competing for his time anyway. Now she's competing for Brian's time with Paul as well. It was like there's this new bestie in the fold. I've got even less time, and he's home even less with the kids.
Yeah, wow.
But she then became included in their friendship, and the three of them became really, really good friends altogether.
Trio.
The trio, a lovely little menage a trois.
Yeah.
And it kind of potentially extended Margaret and Brian's marriage a bit longer because they were kind of in this happy, fun, like, trio. I was going to say threesome, but it's not that. Like, trio. Their bro dates became, all of them together. Margaret seemed a lot happier over this time. She didn't mind so much when Brian was away. Actually, she felt like she enjoyed life more when Brian was away all of a sudden. Any idea why?
Was she got with? Did she get with Paul?
She was having an affair with Paul.
Oh, wow. Okay,
So these three besties all together. When Brian was away for work, Paul was keeping her company.
Yeah, okay,
So it was a menage a deux.
Yeah,
Not a menage a trois.
deux.
After all, deux. Oh, is that why it's called deux?
I don't know.
Duh. No, it's not. I'm not okay today. Oh my God, there's so much more of this story to go. Let's see where this goes. So by the mid-1970s, the relationship between Margaret and Paul, Brian's best friend, had actually become so serious that they wanted it to be a proper relationship. They didn't want it to be secret anymore. There is some rumour here around the timing of this because Margaret's father, the very rich, not Lynn Fox, but Lynn Fox Man, he died in 1974, meaning that her very vast inheritance then came through. And it was when this all kind of came through that she was like, you know what? I want to live the life that I want to live. I want to be with Paul. I don't want to be with Brian anymore.
With a lot of money.
Oh, yes. So that's what they did. They told everyone that they'd fallen in love. Margaret left Brian.
Wow.
And immediately Brian moved out to the house in Sorrento and Paul moved in to the Camberwell house with the 5 kids immediately.
Oh, my God.
And now how weird is this as well? Because for those kids, that's Dad's best friend
Dad's
Paul.
best friend just moves in suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
Isn't
strange.
that weird? Like, can you imagine that?
Just like swapped out. That's
Isn't
really
that
odd.
so bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like any parental breakdown is difficult for children. I mean, whether they're children or grown, adult children, it would be very strange. My parents didn't get divorced, so I don't know from experience, but I can imagine, and I know from people saying that that's really tricky.
Yeah.
Then there's that added layer of mum's new boyfriend is like Uncle Paul.
Yeah, Uncle Paul's just moved in.
Yeah. Now, the youngest child was only 7 at that time when that happened. So he, maybe not as weird for him.
Yep.
Because, obviously still at the time, but then most of his life he's then grown up with Paul.
Yeah.
As more of the dad. So, you don't understand the shifting dynamics of the family so much when you're 7 compared to 17, which the eldest was.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's
when
different.
this all happened. Margaret and Brian got officially divorced and they did share custody, but Brian struggled with this and actually lent on the kids in a negative way. He was really depressed and confided in his children about that, which really turned them against Margaret.
Oh, okay.
And really turned them against Paul as well.
All right.
But they did all, have a pretty nice life of obviously lots of money and still had the big happy family home. It was just a different person in Dad's shoes.
Yeah.
They had even more money now that Margaret's inheritance had come in, and Paul King as well was from a pretty wealthy family.
Oh, okay.
Himself. So the kids split their time between their several farmhouses, their house at the Snow, the one at the beach in Sorrento, and their Melbourne one, plus many, many lavish overseas holidays.
Mm-hmm.
They were, lots of weird family dynamics going on, but, the day-to-day life was pretty good. The older kids did not like Paul, though.
Okay,
They
right.
did not like him.
Yeah.
He was Dad's best friend who swooped in and got him. That's fucking weird, right?
Yeah.
But the youngest child, Matthew, again, he was only 7 when this all happened. So he grew up with him more as a dad. So he kind of grew up seeing Paul as his dad.
Yeah, I guess from the age of 7, it's so young, isn't it? Yeah.
Brian, the actual, biological dad, actually said that Margaret and Paul stopped letting Matthew see him as much. Like they kind of took him on as their child. So the other 4 kids were kind of like, you're older and you're making your own decisions, but Matthew we're going to almost raise as like, Margaret and Paul's child together.
How weird.
Yeah. And then the other kids kind of dissociated a bit from Matthew as well. Because he was kind of seen as like the golden child and like their kid. And so that like it created even stranger dynamics now
tension
between the siblings as well. It became a bit of an outcast of the family. The youngest was Matthew, which I think that's really unfair because like he's been thrust into that life.
Yeah,
he hasn't chosen that for himself.
No, it's just been, it's just he didn't have a choice. It's just like now he's in this and he can't really,
Anyway, in 1995, Margaret and Paul got married. And at this point, so this is after like 20 years together, none of the children were invited to the wedding.
Oh, that's so strange.
Which is extra strange, I think, for Matthew because it seems like
so he wasn't invited either.
No, so there must have been something going on in the family at the time. I get in my research into this, everyone was like, how fucked is that none of the kids were invited to the wedding, rah, rah, rah. But I get that because they don't they don't want this relationship to be a thing. Why would you invite someone to your wedding?
Yeah, that's true. During the I object moment, it might be quite a big thing. Exactly. You've got 4 people doing it.
Anyway, so life goes on. The kids are grown. They have their own lives. They're happy in their rich, older society lives. So, just like in the Winnebago Man documentary, where does the crime come in?
Yeah. Does it in this?
On April 4, 2002, Margaret and Paul went to dinner at Matthew's house to celebrate his son's 2nd birthday. So Matthew's the youngest child. Matthew at this point has a 2-year-old son.
Yeah, right.
By this time, Matthew is 39. He's married to a Chilean girl named Maritza, and they have a toddler named Dominic. So Margaret and Paul go for dinner with the family of 3. It's a normal occurrence. They're close normal family, and they'll have a lovely time. They eat soup, have nice normal conversation, get a little tipsy, and Matthew and Maritza wave off soup. Margaret. All that soup.
All that soup, too much soup.
So as I say, too many liquids.
That's right.
It's good soup. It's good soup. They wave off Margaret and Paul when they leave. Happy families go to bed. And then Margaret and Paul disappear.
Oh.
3 days later, one of the Wales children, Emma, had started to get concerned that she hadn't heard from her mum in several days. And they had breakfast plans the following day, and Margaret always would have called to confirm them.
Yep.
Like always would have said something, but she hadn't done so. So Emma decides to just pop around. She's out like, having a drive, so she decides to pop around to mum's house. She knocks on the door multiple times, but there's no answer. So they let themselves in. She must have had a spare key or knew where they kept the spare key. Emma looked around the house and confirmed that her mum and Paul weren't home. Nothing seemed suspicious though. The only thing that was weird is that when she went into the bedroom, she noticed that the bed had been turned down, but it didn't look like it had been slept in.
Okay.
And she was like, that's weird. But, if you think about it, they've gone for dinner.
Yeah.
And they've known maybe they're going to have a couple of glasses of wine and come home. They've like turned down the bed before they've gone, which is so like that. It's like such a hotel thing.
Yeah.
Down, but maybe they'd done
it's
that.
Fancy lifestyle.
Yeah, but no one had slept in it. And it didn't look like it had been made in the morning. It was turned down ready for them to get into.
Yeah, okay.
Emma went into her mum's bathroom and noticed that her night cream, her toothbrush, her toiletries and medications, everything was there.
All right.
So it didn't seem like they'd packed up to go away for the weekend. So she gives her siblings a call and they all confirm that they've not seen or heard from their mum in a few days either. She gives one of Margaret's good friends a call and she also confirms that she hasn't been able to, not just not heard from, but she hasn't been able to get on to Margaret for a few days. So as far as they know, no one had seen or heard from Margaret or Paul in 3 days. They obviously hadn't gone away anywhere. However, Margaret's car was missing.
Okay.
It wasn't at the house either. But there'd also been no reports of car accidents or anything like that. It was like Margaret and Paul had just vanished into thin air.
Wow.
So Emma and her husband, while they're looking around the house, find a calendar in the home that says that on April 4, so we're at April 6 or 7 at this point.
Yeah.
On April 4, they had on their calendar plans for lunch with friends Janet and Fred Roche.
Okay.
Or Roche.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to have a little side note here.
Uh-huh.
One of the podcasts I listened to about this, getting all the facts and the dates and everything, one of them mentioned the names Janet and Fred Roche.
Yeah.
Nothing else I could find mentioned a Janet or a Fred at all.
Oh.
So I couldn't confirm this. But the reason I desperately went searching is because Janet Roche
Janet Roche,
was one of the Real Housewives of
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Yes.
So when this is the society murders
Yeah.
and they're like living in Camberwell and like fancy and rich, I was like, oh my God, is that
it Janet
Janet
Roche?
Roche
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the Real Housewives? But nothing on the internet says
okay.
any connection between them. So Janet,
Yeah.
if you're listening or if anyone knows, please let us know because I was desperate to know about it. I don't know if this podcast I was listening to just like I don't know where they got it from. I couldn't find anything about a
That's
Janet or a
interesting though.
Fred. Anyway.
It's an uncommon name, so yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she calls this friend Janet, Emma, the daughter of Margaret, calls Janet and says, did you have lunch with Mum and Paul on the 4th? And she says, yes, we did, had lunch, and then they were going off for dinner.
Right.
And she said, she said she was having dinner with her daughter. And Emma was like, well, no, I'm her daughter. She didn't have dinner with me. Or Prudence, my sister, she didn't have dinner with her either. So she was like, oh, hang on, maybe she meant daughter-in-law. And then for the first time, she thought, oh, I should call Matthew,
her
brother.
Yeah.
Remember I said they didn't have like the
didn't have much of a
older
relationship.
siblings did not have a good relationship with the younger sibling. That was the first time she thought, oh wait, I haven't called. None of the other siblings have heard from her, but I haven't called Matthew.
How weird.
And maybe the daughter-in-law they were going to have dinner with was Maritza. They call Matthew and Maritza. They said, yep, Mum and Paul came over for dinner. All fine. They left happy as Larry. All good. Yep. So they're like, right, what is going on here? So Emma goes to the police and officially reports her mum and her stepdad as missing. Mm-hmm. And based on all the evidence, police took it pretty seriously straight away and launched it as a missing persons file straight away.
Oh, right.
No one had heard from them in 3 days. Their car was missing, but everything was home. Their bank accounts hadn't been
touched or anything.
Either. So that night when they'd made this, official statement, all the Wales siblings arrived at every time I say Wales, I'm thinking,
you don't need to do it every time. It's fun though.
They all arrived at Margaret and Paul's house just to be together and help police, like searching and pointing out, like, yes, that's normal. No, that's not normal.
Yeah.
There were no signs of forced entry at the house. They hadn't been taken from the home by force. It wasn't for any obvious financial reasons. There were no ransom requests, which maybe you'd expect in a case like this because they're a very wealthy family. But nothing of the sort came to light at all. So where do we start here in trying to find out where the heck Margaret and Paul are? You probably start with the last people who saw them.
Yeah, of course.
Right? We know that was the younger son, Matthew, and his wife, Maritza. So let's delve a bit more into the two of them.
Yeah.
As I said, he was the one in the family who was very close with Margaret and Paul in particular. It was the other kids who weren't on board with the relationship. And because Matthew stayed very close to his mum, he actually lived with her and Paul for a long time, and they funded him going. He wasn't particularly studious. The other kids did really well at school. He didn't. He just didn't like school and didn't do very well at it. So they funded him doing a trade in hairdressing and then eventually opening his own salon.
All right.
He did really well at this and was making good money, like not society scenes money, but, good for a nice, happy, comfortable Melbourne life. And it also helped that he'd had a house in Malvern, which is one of Melbourne's most expensive suburbs, purchased for him from a trust set up by his parents.
Sure. Okay. Right.
Anyway, it was working in this salon that he met Maritza. She was a retail assistant at a clothes shop in the same centre, and they hit it off right away.
Okay.
Which, if you're a musical theatre person like me, you know why I said, and they hit it off right away. So they started living together. He'd come home, she'd go to work, he'd Anyway, sorry. Yes, Maritza was born in Chile, her family having fled and set up life again here in Melbourne. And Matthew's siblings hated Maritza.
Right.
Hated her.
Okay.
They were super, this is my words, seems like they were super racist.
Okay.
Thought her working class immigrant family and life wasn't good enough for their society lifestyle. One of the siblings described Maritza as a gold digger and a, quote, common vulgar little gutter snipe.
Oh, it's horrible.
Isn't that an awful thing to say?
Gutter snipe. Okay.
They said she'd use vulgar language, was openly sexual all the time in conversations, and Matthew called her mama, which they all found
that's
super
odd.
creepy.
Yeah,
which
okay.
is really
Mama,
creepy.
yeah.
The siblings all said that Matthew and Maritza's relationship was very reminiscent to Margaret and Matthew's relationship. Like mum was like a domineering female figure, and Matthew just kind of fell into her stride. And then he did the same with his
calling her mama
wife.
as well. Yeah.
Exactly. But no matter what others thought, Matthew and Maritza were in love, and they got married in 1998 and were very happy. A year later, they welcomed a baby boy called Dominic, who I mentioned earlier, and they decided to get a new home for their new family of 3. He tried to convince his mum to sell the Malvern house and give him and Maritza the profit from the sale, but Margaret was hesitant about this. She was kind of going, you're 39 or 30, whatever he was at that point, kind of, start to stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah, okay, right.
But while all this was happening, the discussions about selling the house, Matthew got a bad injury to his hand that spelled the end of his hairdressing career.
Oh, okay.
Just really, that's really
really
tragic.
sad.
That's
Yeah,
awful, Maritza wasn't working and she was home with the new bub, and now Matthew couldn't work either. So Margaret then reluctantly agreed to sell the Malvern house and give them the profit of the home, which was, the profit of the sale was $140,000, which I worked out is about $270K today.
Yeah, okay, right.
So, nothing to sneeze at.
No.
Absolutely. With this money, they bought a clothing shop. For this to be their new venture.
Okay,
they couldn't
right.
do hairdressing anymore, so they did this. By early 2002, they'd made enough money to buy their own townhouse and were living pretty happy, normal, kind of middle to upper middle class lives. So that's just a little bit of background on the last people to have seen Margaret and Paul alive.
Yeah.
Now, Emma Wales, one of the daughters, has made comments about Matthew's behaviour when he found out that his mum had gone missing. And remember, he's like really dependent on his mum. They've got a really weird, close relationship. She said that immediately when Matthew arrived at his mum and Paul's house that night, quote, he burst into the front room. His head looked like it was going to explode and I could see the veins in his neck. I looked at him very emotional and asked what's going on. He then walked into a corner of the room and held his eyes with his fingers and let out a distraught cry and moan. He seemed overwhelmed by the whole situation, which I thought was an absolute overreaction. The police had not even had the chance to introduce themselves to Matthew. For all he knew, Mum and Paul could have been away for the weekend. Sally and I were not crying, we didn't look distraught, and we didn't alarm him in any way.
That's so strange.
So they've said, do you know where Mum and Paul are? He said no, and she said neither do we. Do you want to come around to the house? And he's walked into the house and had that massive reaction.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa. We just said we don't know where they are.
Yeah, he's really stressed.
It's not like no one's like found bodies or anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matthew's reaction seemed incredibly performative. And it only got stranger from there. As the sisters started to question Matthew about the dinner and the last time he'd seen them, he only gave super vague answers about the dinner. And each answer seemingly was like kept being interrupted by these weird, wild emotional outbursts. Like theatrical displays of emotion. Like me saying I thought I was dying because I had
Yeah.
At one point he had his head between his knees and he was moaning and wailing. Oh, they're wailing.
Wailing.
And crying out, where's my mama? What happened to my mama?
Oh my God. Okay.
He's like a 39-year-old
so weird.
Man. Yeah. So frustrated that she couldn't kind of get anything out of him because he was acting weird. Emma called Maritza, who, as we know, is her best friend, in hopes that she could, give some more concrete answers about what happened after the dinner, where did they go?
Yeah, what happened?
Blah, blah, blah. Mm, So Emma asks Maritza, like, what time had they left the house? They got to your house, everything, they had dinner, what happened after that? And Maritza then was super vague and like just told Emma she couldn't remember what time they left. Yeah, they came for dinner, but I don't know what time they left. And Emma was like, do you have any kind of time frame? Was it 7 p.m.? Was it 11 p.m.?
Yeah.
And Maritza was like, yeah, no, I don't know. And then before Emma could ask anything else, Maritza said, is Matthew there? Can you tell him to come home? I've got a headache. And hung up.
Oh, wow. I've been questioned about the missing parents.
So Matthew is so over the top.
He's freaking out.
That he's freaking out saying, where's my mama? What's happened to my mama? And Maritza's like, don't know what time they left. I've got a headache. Tell me to come home. So police obviously want to talk to Matthew about the last time he saw his mum and Paul. So they wait for him to settle down and they talk to him calmly. They ask about the dinner and the night and what had gone on, and Matthew said, yep, it was a lovely dinner. We had soup, we chatted, we laughed. Maritza went up and put Dominic to bed, and we saw them off, watched them drive away, smiled and waved, nothing out of the ordinary. They drove the normal way down the street they would to go home. But then when police pressed for more detail, Matthew got super emotional again, now hyperventilating and saying he couldn't handle it. They needed to stop speaking to him and go and find his mama. And that he says he wants to go home and he can't do this anymore, so he goes home. The rest of the Wales kids go to Prudence's house, the other daughter, and they kind of gather there and put their heads together about what they could or should do to help.
Yep.
They make a plan to divide and conquer. One kid will stay at Margaret's house, one will go look for the car, etc. And then they try to call Matthew, so this is them later on. They try to call Matthew to, get him to come and help as well, but he doesn't answer over and over and over again. Like, what if they were calling to say, oh my God, we found Mum?
Yeah.
She's not answering.
For Mama.
For Mama. Looking for Mama. That's when the siblings all look around at each other with that look. That unspoken sibling thing.
Right.
Where they're all looking at each other going, what does Matthew know?
Yeah.
So Damien, one of the sons, calls detectives and asks if they can send someone over to Matthew and Maritza's place, not only because of their weird suspicious activity and behaviour, but now because they can't get a hold of them.
Yeah.
So police do so. They find the place completely dark. No one answered the doorbell until the 5th ring, when Matthew came to the door and said he'd taken a sleeping pill when he got home because he was so distraught about his mama. He wanted to sleep so he could help with the search tomorrow.
Okay. That's so strange.
It's weird. What if they call in the middle of the night to say, oh my God, they're here, thank God.
They're here,
One thing that detectives note in this chat with Matthew at the door is that he doesn't bring up Paul, the stepdad, at all. He's saying he's concerned and distraught about his mother. But remember, Paul has been his stepdad since he was 7.
Yeah.
He's grown up with him as his dad, but he doesn't speak about him at all. He's just talking about, like, you need to find my mum. I'm really upset about my mum. And the cop just notes this as being a bit odd. So the next morning rolls around. We're at April 9th now. The kids and their spouses this time all gather at Margaret's place again. And Matthew's theatrics come straight back out. He's wailing, where's my mama? But now the siblings are not having a bar of it.
Right.
In his sister Emma's words, unfortunately, I could show him no affection because I really smelled a rat.
Right,
So do detectives.
Yeah.
They smell a rat as well. Yes, everyone reacts differently, but this is odd.
Yeah.
So now they start wondering if Matthew knows more than he is saying. By this point, it's been 5 days, and neither Margaret nor Paul have accessed their bank accounts. They also both take medication that they should have daily, and that's all been left at the home as well. So it's getting more and more dire the longer time passes without them being in touch. So dire, in fact, the missing persons team hands the case over to homicide.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And homicide wants to know more about this Matthew Wales King. All they have is odd behaviour at this point, but it goes back further than the reactions over the past few days. Detectives speak to Matthew's siblings, who open up about the fact their little brother has always been, let's say, a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Emma described Matthew growing up as the golden child to his mother, that all the siblings said she'd very obviously favour him.
Yeah.
She told police he'd been odd, specifically citing cruelty to animals.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a
Don't you
sign.
hear about
Yeah,
that
yeah.
so often? No spoilers, but you hear about that quite often.
Yeah.
He would crucify flies at the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
And at 10, he was known to catch mice, tie them to the back of his motorbike and drive around the farm with
How
them
awful.
alive on the back of the motorbike.
Oh, gross.
Damien, one of Matthew's brothers, less subtly described Matthew to police as, so he said he has always been a prick of a kid.
Right, right.
Which is a term my mum would always use.
Prick of a kid.
A prick of a kid.
Yeah.
Was that like a very 90s term?
It must
or did
be,
my mum
yeah.
maybe take it from Damien,
I don't know.
Damien Wales?
Real prick of a kid.
Prick of a kid. All the siblings tell homicide detectives they need to look into Matthew and Maritza.
Yeah.
And they wonder if they might even have an idea about why. You see, a couple of months before all of this happened, there had been a financial issue in the family. Matthew and Maritza's retail store hadn't been doing so well. It was $52,000 in debt, which in 2002 is like, really, I mean, it's obviously a lot of debt for anyone, but it's like, double that. It's quite substantial. And there was another family financial issue that I will get into later. So detectives ask Matthew to come into the station for a proper interview. They don't let on that they're looking at him as, a potential person of interest, but he was the last person to see him alive. So of course they're going to have multiple interviews. He comes into the station with pages and pages of handwritten notes transcribing the conversations that he'd had with his mum and Paul on the night of their disappearance.
Oh, my God.
He'd had these, full transcripts that he'd written up, like unprompted, not asked.
How weird.
Yes. Police said that he was again super performative and nothing he said was helpful. At the same time, a detective had gone into the shop to talk to Maritza. She didn't know this was happening. She didn't know someone was going to rock up at her work. Yet when they turned up, she pulled out 5 pages of typed notes, which was a statement, step by step, of what had happened at dinner, what they'd spoken about, etc. Just on her person.
That's so strange.
Yeah. This statement said Paul and Margaret had come over for dinner. They'd had 1 bottle of wine between the 4 of them. They'd all played with Dominic for a while, and then Margaret and Paul left around 9:45 p.m.
Okay, so now she knows the time.
Exactly. The statement also said that the whole family was super close, like the whole family, the 5 kids, all the spouses, Mum, Paul, everyone was super close. We all got along really well, except kind of Margaret.
Right.
She was a bit standoffish and snobbish toward Maritza, but otherwise everyone loved her and they were a big, happy family.
Right, okay.
All right, April 10, 6 days of them missing. Police hold a press conference about the disappearances. They tell the media there seems to be no known reason as to why these people have disappeared the way they have. These are people you wouldn't class as at risk of going missing. There'd been no contact with anyone for any kind of ransom, nothing. They've just gone into thin air. They're retired people who have great family support. It's completely out of character. This is when the media dubs these disappearances the society.
Right.
Well, probably didn't call them murders at that point, but it's just the society case.
Yeah, okay, right.
Because they're really really rich,
Yep.
Within a few hours of the news airing, police started receiving hundreds of tips, as they always do.
Yeah, yeah.
One of them was from a man who lived in Middle Park, which is about just a suburb of Melbourne on the beach, about 25 minutes from where Paul and Margaret lived in Glen Iris. But it's not somewhere they went. They didn't have any friends in Middle Park. There's not like a shopping centre that you go to Middle Park for. So no one knew why this car could have been there. The caller to police said he'd been out walking his dog on the night of April 6th and he noticed a silver Mercedes parked along the road around the corner from his house. He noticed it, like he just kind of clocked it, and then the next day when he went out to take his dog for a walk, it was still there.
Right.
And he noticed it because it was a very suburb.
Yeah.
It's quite suburban street, and he hadn't seen that car before.
Yeah.
So police go and look, and lo and behold, it's Margaret's car.
Oh, wow.
Detectives searched the car, swabbed it for DNA, and when they attempted to lift fingerprints from the steering wheel, there were none. No fingerprints
None
at all.
Wow.
So whoever drove the car and left it on that street in Middle
Wiped it all
Park
down.
has wiped the steering wheel clean.
Wow.
A search of the car and the surrounding areas didn't turn up anything else whatsoever. Nothing. But during their canvass of the neighbourhood, detectives spoke with a lot of other residents who said they'd seen the car parked on the street as well, and they were actually able to place it there as early as April 5th.
Okay.
Which was, remember, they went for dinner.
Yeah,
the last
yeah.
time they were seen was April 4th.
April 4th. Yep. Okay.
They then also searched Matthew and Maritza's house, again, not letting on that it was, it wasn't like they didn't need a search warrant because they were suspects. They just asked, like, they were here. Can we have a look around? They didn't find anything odd at all, only that Matthew's car had a strange chemical smell to it. But they ran tests and nothing of note came up. So it wasn't like a full search of the house. They were just like, can we have a look around?
Yeah.
Now, weeks go by and nothing happens. Margaret and Paul still aren't heard from. Everyone involved now knows they've run into trouble, some kind of foul play, something has happened. They've not just taken off for a jaunt in Middle Park and not told anyone, like they were gone.
Yeah.
Everyone knew this at this point. Then on April 29, so remember the last time they were seen was April 4.
Yeah.
April 29, police get a call from rangers at the Yarra State Forest. So it's up near Marysville, quite close to where Erin Patterson lives and allegedly went foraging for death cap mushrooms, if you're following that story. It's about an hour and a half from Glen Iris, which is where Margaret and Paul lived.
Yep.
The rangers were calling because they noticed a strange-looking mound of recently upturned earth just off one of the walking paths. They knew this land like the back of their hand, so they knew immediately that this wasn't normal. They originally thought it might have been a lyrebird nest, so they left it. But they went back past again later and thought, nah, that ain't right. That ain't right.
Ain't no birds in there.
There ain't no lyrebirds.
Yeah.
Not even honest birds.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
Thank you. So he took another ranger with him to go, come and have a look at this, which I think is really smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
He thought there's something weird going on here. He doesn't want to be the only person. He doesn't know what he's going to find. But then, not implicating himself potentially in anything.
Yep.
So they go and have a bit of a poke about at the mound with a rake. And can you guess what they might have found?
2 bodies.
As they have a bit of a poke around and a bit of a dig with the rake, they find 3 large cement blocks, like, cinder blocks.
Oh, yeah.
Chained together, which were holding down a large piece of plastic. Not like a tarp, like plastic.
Okay.
Remember this detail. Okay, put a pin in that. The rangers thought it was probably just a trash pile, but they kept lightly digging away. They moved the plastic and underneath it unveiled cloth, like some kind of fabric. The rake ripped a bit of this fabric, and as soon as it ripped, a god-awful smell hit them, and they had made the horrifying realisation of what they had uncovered. I hope to never, ever smell that smell, but everyone talks about, anyone who's come across a body talks about, like, the smells that it's...
After a certain amount of time, it's just,
and it's very specifically identifiable about what that smell is. So police were called. They went and they did more than just poke around with a rake, and they uncovered the bodies of Margaret Wales King and Paul King. Paul was on top of Margaret. Their heads had each been wrapped in cloth and their bodies covered with plastic, with the cinder blocks weighing it and them down. They were buried just off the walking track. So whoever had done this hadn't even had the care or thought to go deep into the bush.
Just off the walking track. Bizarre.
They were both in a fairly advanced stage of decomposition, so they couldn't determine a cause of death just from looking at the bodies.
Yeah.
They both had strips of green cloth tied around their necks, but detectives couldn't immediately tell if this is what had killed them or if this was used to tie the fabric around their heads.
Yeah.
And they didn't know whether this had happened before or after they died. So autopsies later revealed they both had full stomachs with very little digestion having occurred, meaning they had been killed shortly after they'd eaten. Yeah, they didn't know at this point whether, which meal it was, until they then looked at the contents of the stomach, went and looked at the statements from Matthew and Maritza about what they'd served for dinner, and realised they'd been killed within a few hours after dinner that night. The cause of death for Paul was revealed as blunt force trauma to the head with signs of strangulation, And Margaret's cause of death was listed as asphyxiation, but she also had bruising on her body, which suggested she too had been hit and rendered unconscious before the asphyxiation.
Oh, wow.
So the death, though, was actually asphyxiation, even though she'd been hit before. Blood tests showed that both Paul and Margaret had consumed normal levels of alcohol, and they also had paracetamol and codeine in their systems as well. So paracetamol's like obviously Panadol in Australia, it's like Tylenol in America, and codeine is
Really strong, isn't it?
It's really strong, but it used to be much more like Panadine was a normal over-the-counter thing that you could get. It's like a strong Panadol, strong Tylenol. It's now you've got to have a prescription for it. But it was, they're in their 70s. Like wasn't maybe that weird. So then detectives have to make the awful call to the family to tell them that their mum and Paul had been found, and the kids had to come in to make the formal identification. The announcement of the discovery of Margaret and Paul's bodies set off a media frenzy, and this is when it was dubbed the Society Murders.
Yeah.
This is not, they've not wound up dead on the side of the road somewhere after a car accident. This is very obviously murder. In his statement to the media when they announced this, Detective Charlie Bazina, which if you're a true crime podcast, especially in Australia listener, you probably will have heard from or of him before. He's like kind of gone rogue on the media rounds. Like he's retired now and he just talks about all the cases. He's really fascinating.
Yeah.
He said about where the bodies were found. He said, given the popularity of this area, you would think that if a person is aware, they would have made more of an effort to get further into the bush or certainly away from the track. So, like, he's throwing out barbs immediately, being like, whoever did this is fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And because Melbourne's media is smart and also snaky, they had by this point cottoned on to the fact that Matthew and Maritza were being looked into.
Yeah, sure.
Which is why, as this press conference was going on, detectives who were also smart and snaky were at the morgue serving Matthew with a search warrant for his home and asked if he would accompany them back to the house immediately so they can conduct the search.
Yep.
So like I said before, they'd had a look around, but now they've got an official search warrant that they can open drawers, they can throw
they can do
things
whatever they
around,
want.
do whatever they want. At the house, they found a large shovel, a set of D shackles like those found on the cinder blocks, a ball of green twine that matched the bindings on the bodies.
Oh, wow.
And an inflatable child's raft that appeared to match the plastic found with the bodies.
Child's raft.
And this, Sammy Peterson, is where I reveal that the plastic found covering Margaret and Paul's bodies was a deflated kiddie pool.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And police have gone to the house and found an inflatable raft made of the same material.
Oh, my God.
Matched this kiddie pool.
Oh, my God.
In Matthew and Maritza's bedroom, detectives also discovered that the doona and sheets on the bed were similar in colour and fabric to the fabric found around Paul and Margaret's heads.
Wow. And
they're like, we have got everything right here. But it's all circumstantial at this point. Police need hard evidence.
Yeah.
They found dodgy things in the house, but that doesn't prove anything.
Right.
So they weren't arrested. They were able to go on living, quote unquote, normal lives because it wasn't normal at all. They were being very closely followed by police and also media.
Yeah.
They were camped outside their house. You know when the media gets a hold of something?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Again, like Aaron Patterson, they get a hold of going, we think this person's done something. They are out the front of the house all the time. Cameras, microphones in the face every time they leave. On May 7, the funeral for Margaret and Paul was held. Of course, all the kids, including Matthew and Maritza, were there, and lots of media cameras attended as well. And Matthew repeated his performance of the hysterical, grieving son. There was even more noticeable animosity. Oh, sorry, I had a bit of a stroke there.
Animosity.
There was even more noticeable animosity between the Wales children at this point because, and the media didn't know this part, At this stage, Matthew was refusing to submit DNA sample to investigators.
Oh, wow.
So they're looking for who has murdered his
Yep.
parents, and he's like,
He's
no,
refusing
thank you,
to
I
help.
don't want to give a sample.
That's nuts.
Yeah. When Emma pressed her brother for a reason why he wouldn't do everything he possibly could to find the parents' killer, Matthew said, I'm protecting my family, and then burst into tears. And they were like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, what
do
does
you
that
mean?
mean?
What do you
You're
mean?
not doing that.
Exactly. And it seemed things at home were getting a bit dicey too, because Maritza started to show some cracks. They were being followed by the media and police for a month now, and police think they see maybe a bit of a weak link in Maritza.
Uh-huh.
So the day of the funeral, after the funeral, they call her in for a bit of questioning again. She doesn't say anything, but a couple of days later, with a lawyer, she offers to come in and speak to detectives.
Oh, wow.
Unraveling. The detective, though, immediately was like, oh, yeah, it's like super cool that you're here, babe. Like, thanks for coming in, but, you know, I'm doing you a favour. You're not doing me a favour. I know who the killer is. I know exactly what's happened, but cool. Go on, babe. If you want to talk to me, go for gold, which I just think is like so boss.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
not playing into being like, oh my
Not
God,
playing
thank
games.
you so much
Yeah.
for coming and speaking to us. He's like, yep, okay, you want to tell me what happened? Go on then. So with this reaction, Maritza's gone, I'm not blowing my chance at immunity here. And she immediately launched into her full version of events. Maritza said the couple had been at their home for dinner. So Margaret and Paul had been at their house for dinner. And at the end of the night, something happened. She said she went to put the toddler to bed, and when she came down, Margaret and Paul had left, and Matthew was acting odd. He
Right.
was sweating and pacing and being very strange. And she was like, what's happened? Why did they leave without saying goodbye? And Matthew said, actually, there's something I have to tell you, and took her out into the front yard to show his mother and stepfather's bodies propped up against the front fence.
Oh, my God.
Maritza said she ran upstairs crying and was violently ill. Matthew then came upstairs looking pale and white and said to Maritza, do you hate me for what I've done? She just said, I don't know, I feel sick. What are you going to do? And he said, I'll cover them and I'll fix it. I can't remember exactly when, but I asked him what he did. So this is Maritza's statement. I can't remember exactly when, but I asked him what he did, and he said he hit his mother over the back of the head with a piece of wood.
Wow.
This is all investigators needed to get a warrant for Matthew's arrest. On the morning of May 11th, a team of detectives and patrol officers arrived at the home and took him into custody. Now, given his weird behaviour and his history of instability and like wailing and moaning and everything, they really thought like he might try to hurt himself or someone else or try to run or something. But when he was told he was under arrest for murder, he just quietly said yes and went willingly.
Wow.
When he got to the station, he seemed relieved. Don't you hear that so often?
Yeah.
It's like this weight has been lifted and they're like, I don't have to keep this
Oh,
secret
they're stressed
anymore.
about it for so long and then it's done.
And pretty much as soon as they sat down, he started explaining what happened. You ready?
Yep.
Earlier that night, he had crushed up pain medication
Yeah.
and put it in his parents' soup. They then all sat and had a lovely meal, had some wine, they played with the baby. Then Maritza went upstairs to put the baby to bed and, like she'd said, Margaret and Paul left. Well, they tried to. On their way to the car, 69-year-old Margaret and 75-year-old Paul noticed that they seemed unsteady on their feet. They'd only had one bottle of wine between them all. Before they could question why they felt a bit strange, Matthew, grabbing a length of pine timber that he had previously hidden in the hedge beside the driveway, raised it over their heads and brought it crashing down on both of his parents. He choked Paul and his mother with those strips of green fabric that had been found around their necks, and then he lifted their bodies up, propping them up against the fence in order to hide them from view of the street until the morning.
Till the morning.
The next morning, he grabbed a bed sheet, ripped it into strips that he used to cover their faces because he didn't want to see their expression.
Oh, my God.
He then grabbed his son's deflated kiddie pool and wrapped their bodies up with it.
Oh, my God.
He then drove their Mercedes off, dumping it in a random street in Middle Park, and returned to his house without it. He went down the road and rented a small trailer into which he loaded the bodies. This is 2 days after, by the way. He pushed the trailer into the yard out of view from the neighbours. So now they're just wrapped in this kiddie pool in the trailer. From there, he went to a local hardware store and purchased a sash cord that had been found wrapped around their bodies, as well as the D-shackles and cinder blocks that were found on top of their bodies when they were unearthed. Now this is after 2 days. He drove the bodies on the trailer out to the Yarra Ranges to bury them. He told police that he buried his mother lower than his stepfather in order to diminish her domineering personality once and for all.
Oh, my God.
How sick is that?
Psycho.
He's had a thought enough to go, you can
bury her
go on the
lower.
bottom because you don't get to be on top anymore.
Yeah. That's awful.
Mama. He also admitted that his original plan had been to drop their bodies into the ocean and weigh them down. That's why he got these concrete cinder blocks.
Yeah.
But he was worried they might float to the surface, so he just decided to bury them in the forest instead. So cops are sitting there like, okay, but why?
Yeah.
Matthew replied, because there's so much animosity and hurt between my mother and myself. And then he just trailed off. So they're trying to get more out of him. He's backtracking. He's kind of going off on tangents. He's not really explaining anything. But then eventually they got him back on track and he explained his motive more clearly. He said he had very conflicting feelings when it came to his mum. He said he loved her and relied on her, but he also resented the way that he felt she used her wealth to dominate and manipulate others, specifically her children.
Right.
He blamed her for alienating him from the rest of his family the whole time, like when he was a child and all into in his adult life. And that resentment and anger was just building in him for years and years. Now, he said things came to a head just a couple of months before the murders. Remember I said there was another financial thing that came up. Right. There was Margaret and her sister, so the two children of the rich trucky dad, had a holiday house in Queensland that they wanted to sell. They decided that they wanted to sell.
Yep.
Now, according to the will, the Wales children would receive an equal share of this estate, but it would go into a trust. They wouldn't get it.
Yep.
Like the cash straight away. And Matthew kind of saw this as her way of continuing to control their lives and their finances, even when they're all in their 40s.
Right, okay.
So after 2 months of dispute over whether they were going to sell this property and what's going to happen with the money, Margaret handed over the consent documents to Matthew. Loyal to his mother, as always, he signed the papers like she wanted. What she didn't know, though, was that Matthew, who she either thought she could always count on because he's the golden child Matthew, or maybe thought he was too dumb to understand all the legal technicalities, he actually saw the move for exactly what it was, which was saying, I'll take this. The other kids don't get a say. Matthew will do this for me. So essentially he's signed off on allowing the money to go into a trust, not to them. And he's signed it agreeing, but in the back of his head going, nah, mum's fucking me over here.
Right.
And this proves that she thinks I'm too dumb or that she will forever try to control me with
Yeah,
money.
right.
So something in his head at that moment just clicked and he went, I'm a killer.
Wow.
So when he said all of this, the detective noted that he hadn't again brought up anything about Paul. It was all about
her.
mum. So the detective said, if this is the case, why not decide to just kill your mum? What about Paul? Matthew replied to this, I quite like Paul, but at the same time, he destroyed my mother and father's relationship.
I quite like that's so calm and that's so strange to answer that.
And like, well, if I'm going to kill mum, I may as well kill him as well
well.
because he actually did, break up my mum and dad 30 years ago. So Matthew Wales King was charged with 2 counts of murder, But investigators didn't really know what to do about Maritza.
Yeah.
They weren't sure if she was just kind of like yeeting herself out of the story or she actually hadn't been involved. So they charged her with being an accessory after the fact.
Yeah.
As they kept looking into this case to set up, what the case or what the prosecution was going to be. So they looked into everything. They confirmed that Margaret Wales King had indeed changed her will and this thing with the trust and the Queensland property, everything, all of this checked out. So just seemed like Matthew's gone, she's going to try to control me financially, and he just went mental, just decided that's what he's going to do. Now, through all of his admissions and all of her interviews, police actually did become confident that Maritza was telling the truth and didn't know of Matthew's plans, and only found out what had happened after he had killed them. And I actually heard Charlie Bazina talking about this on a podcast, and he said that she was not involved.
Wow.
Before. She did not know he planned to kill them. He didn't say anything. He was really confident of that. She did admit, though, of course, that she knew what happened after it happened, and that she obviously didn't go to police. But she also didn't touch the bodies or help with anything at all. She said she didn't say anything. She didn't go to police herself because she was terrified for her family. Do that. Like what happens here if I do this? Matthew also kept saying over these days, I'm going to turn myself in. I'm going to turn myself in. In this interview, she just told police, quote, I was brought up so good. I can't believe this shit is happening to me. I just want to die. I'm so tired. It's like a nightmare.
Oh, God,
so they
it would be a nightmare.
This woman has been caught up in this and has not known what to do. It's taken her a goddamn month to come forward,
it's a long time, but
forward. Now, all the other family members believe that, yes, while Matthew was the killer, they believe his wife's role has been vastly underplayed.
Right, okay.
But at the end of the day, there was no evidence to show this, and detectives were confident that she'd, quote unquote, only been an accessory after the fact. So she pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice, and Matthew pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder.
Wow.
Of course, because they pleaded guilty, there didn't need to be a trial, which the family was thankful for at the very least. And they presented to court together on the same day for the hearing, Maritza and Matthew, because there was they just needed to read out the list of evidence of what had happened. So in December 2002, Matthew appeared before the Supreme Court in Melbourne, where he was sentenced to 30 years in prison with a minimum of 24 years non-parole. For perverting the course of justice, Maritza Wales was given a 2-year suspended sentence, so she didn't have to spend any time behind bars at all. The judge did not believe she played any part in the murders at all. He actually said really clearly in his sentencing, I want to make it clear that there is no evidence linking Maritza Wales to these murders.
Wow.
Still, a 2-year suspended sentence for covering up details about 2 murders for a month.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah.
Now, I want to finish this by reading an excerpt from an article from The Age newspaper that was written in April 2003. It's just really beautifully written.
Yeah.
And I think there was no byline on it, so I can't give credit to the writer, but it was from The Age. He is about to be sentenced to 30 years in jail, but Matthew Wales, double murderer and loving husband, presents only a mask of bland passivity. For more than an hour, the man whose head just kept going bananas, quote, as he bashed his mother and stepfather to death, has shown no emotion except towards his wife. Matthew Wales does not look like someone facing the biggest day of his life, and all of it entirely out of his control. He's just met Justice John Coldry's words with a steady gaze, shifting only to reach for his wife's hand and trying to make eye contact with her. Maritza Wales has been sobbing and wiping her eyes behind him since the judge began retelling the facts that brought them here. Her distress does not seem to lessen, even as she is told her jail sentence will be suspended. If the toll has marked either of them, it is Maritza Wales, who appears drawn and haggard. During the sentencing, Matthew's brother Damien Wales turns repeatedly in his seat to try to confront his younger brother. Matthew Wales gives every impression of being oblivious. Outside the Supreme Court, Damien says that frustrated family members want a further inquest, claiming there had not been an investigative type inquiry. This is a quote from Damien, "We are just at the mercy of what two people have said, two people who are proven liars and who are obviously criminals." In a prepared statement, the family said the court process was not intended to uncover the full facts of the case and cause of death. Another quote from Damien, "Tragically, the confession of our brother today stands as a so-called factual account of the details and reasons behind these brutal crimes. To us, his account was self-serving and based on selfish opportunity and selfish greed. We believe we have a right to the full facts, and we believe the public has a right to know."
Wow.
There has never been any coronial inquest. There's never been any further inquest to this, despite that being the calls from the family. They've taken the case on what Matthew and Maritza have said happened, and he's been in jail so it was 2003. It is now 2025. Wow. He's got a 24-year non-parole period. So he's very close to coming up to potentially the end of his custodial sentence.
Wow.
So that is the story of the Society murders and Matthew Wales King, whose siblings do not for a second believe that Maritza had less to do with it, which is so fascinating. This is one of those stories I remember from like hearing it at the time and watching it on the news. And my memory of it was that Maritza was absolutely involved.
Right,
so that must be how strong the family was in coming out and talking about that. Because that's my memory of it, is that this Maritza's got away, like she was the, kind of evil woman behind the scenes. Or is that just like a society thing where it's like, the Chilean woman must know more? Like, is that a racist thing? Or is that the way the family must have been so outspoken about it at the time that I remember that? Because like I said, this podcast I was listening to with Charlie Bazzina said, we are so convinced she did not know anything about it. The judge made sure he put in his statement that there was no evidence suggesting she knew anything about it beforehand.
Yeah.
But
How
the
bizarre.
family is convinced. Maybe that's a way of like a shifting of blame, of hoping it wasn't
hoping
all
it's
your
not
brother.
just him. Yeah. If you crush up the painkillers and everything in the soup as well, it just seems like
so premeditated.
Yeah.
And there's another detail I didn't put in there, but apparently he had actually planned to do it about 2 weeks beforehand, but they'd rescheduled the dinner. So it was that premeditated. He'd been planning it for a while.
Oh,
and
wow.
just waited for the dinner to happen.
Oh, that's nuts. What a story.
Do you remember that story?
No, I don't.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for telling me that, Georgia love.
And give him a Google. I'm sure we'll put a photo of him on the Insta anyway. But tell me if you don't know the story at all, tell me what you're picturing.
Of him?
Yes.
I just kind of imagine kind of a crestfallen sort of character. Like I just find someone that's been, I don't know, he felt like he was so overpowered by his mother all the time. I just imagine someone that just hasn't got a lot going on. And
so me, I don't think I agree. That's what you would think.
Yeah.
And in my head, I almost picture the Mornington Monster guy.
Yes.
So look him back up, John Sharp. He looks like a bit of a weaselly, weedy, weak little man. But Matthew Wales is... like he just looks really normal. He's got shaved head, kind of built guy, not like intimidating built or anything. He just looks like such a normal Melbourne man. He doesn't look scary. He doesn't look weedy and creepy or like the Norman Bates type that's, controlled by his mother. It's just the whole thing is just...
Oh, wow. We'll put a photo up of him on the Instagram. Yeah.
So I kind of feel like it's a bit like... reminiscent of Australia's version of the Menendez brothers. Like, kill your parents for money. Kill your parents because you didn't like how they controlled you forever. Like, obviously the Menendez brothers say that they were abused but by their parents and I don't think Matthew ever tried to claim that. I did see in some of my research that he said that Paul was abusive towards him, but that only came up once when I was researching it and I just couldn't get that verified.
Yeah, and he didn't seem to mind Paul too much, it seemed.
It feels like potentially it's something that came out as a maybe this will lessen my sentence.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But yeah, here's one for you kids at home. Don't kill your parents.
Don't kill your parents,
You'll be found out.
Yeah, that's really good advice for everybody.
Well, like, do you think that you're going to just get your parents' inheritance?
just straight away. Yeah, no one's ever going to look into you.
They're not going to look into me. They're not going to know that this was the last place they were ever seen alive.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like that he went crazy and did it. It was premeditated. He drugged their soup and...
Yeah, and the theatrics of it all. And, he overdid it with all the theatrics.
So they're the society murders.
The society murders. Well, Georgia Love, to take us out today, I thought we could have some lovely speak pipes from people.
This is such a long episode. I'm so sorry. I didn't realise how long my script was.
Hey, please, never be sorry for such a thing like that.
Okay.
I have got some speak pipes today. Let's go through them one by one.
We love speak pipes. Yeah.
We love speak pipes. Yeah. If you want to leave us a voice note or a speak pipe, you can absolutely do that. The link is below in the show notes and also in our Instagram bio.
Oh, yeah, it is.
You ready for this one? This one comes from Ben.
Hey, Sammy and Georgia, this is Ben. Massive fan of the podcast.
I know this voice.
Thank you so much for brightening up my Mondays and Thursdays. I actually listen to it while I'm at work all the time. Like a lot of people, it wasn't actually found organically. It was recommended to me by a friend. So a massive shout out to my friend that found it for me. I don't want to give out too much information on them, so let's just call them Georgia Muv, who's a massive fan of the podcast as well. I work with them, a massive Saints fan. Congrats, Sammy, on getting your car back. Hopefully it didn't cost you too much. I'd love if at some stage you investigated the Tynong and Frankston North murders. It's something that's really interesting to me, one of those big cases of the 1980s. And as well as that, I've got a joke for you. What's the most relaxing type of Asian dairy?
I don't know.
Thai cheese. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. You've been a hot crowd. Never forget that.
You've been a hot crowd, Ben. So that's my good friend Ben Morrance.
Ben Morrance. We love Ben Morrance.
I brought up in the last episode. I work with Ben, and
Ben's
he legitimately
great.
does listen to the episodes at work every Monday and Thursday, because at about midday every day he comes around into the newsroom and has a quip about whatever that episode was.
Ben's the
we
best.
love you, Ben. And he is a very big St Kilda Football Club fan, so he was very distraught that my jacket went missing.
Well, yeah, we have had some inquiries about that jacket as well.
have.
So, yeah, let's talk about that as well. What about this one from Claire?
Hey, Sammy and G-Love. I have been a long-time fan of Georgia. I also love Hamilton, musicals in general, and am a stickler for grammar. So, Georgia, thank you so much for your service in correcting the world's grammar.
My twin.
All that being said, I only started listening to your podcast a couple of weeks ago, but I have listened to other amazing podcasts for years and never once left a review, sent an email, let alone sent a speak pipe. So I love you guys. I feel like I've listened to and watched everything to do with crime, but now I find myself telling everyone I know that this is literally not like any other crime podcast, and the title is true. And it's really impressive the way you two can discuss the subject matter that you do and still leave us as listeners feeling really happy and feeling really good listening. And while I do love the joke breaks, I have to say that the more horrendous and horrific the story, the better, because it always just reminds me of my sanity, which it is always welcome. The way you two both articulate yourselves really scratches an itch in my brain, and when I listen to you two, I imagine myself sitting on a third chair with a glass of wine, listening to my friends chat. So I love the PCast. Love you both. Bye.
Oh my God, I love
the
you, Claire.
PCast. How great's Claire?
PCast is happening.
Yeah.
We're making this a thing.
We're bringing PCast
Claire,
back.
I love you so much. I feel like you're one of mine. You're one of mine. Also, can I just say, Sammy?
Yeah.
Did we discuss you wearing a bright red tracksuit on this podcast? I know you discussed it on your two drunk aunties. I don't think we discussed it. I think you just appeared in your bright red podcast on our. I have. So when I went to Brisbane last weekend, you stayed and looked after poor Dream.
Yep.
At my place. I'm in a new apartment at the moment. I'll tell you about that next week. But Paudrey had only had one night in this new place, and I was worried she was going to freak out it being left there on her own. So you very kindly came. I can only assume you wore your red tracksuit. Is that true?
I don't know.
I have found pieces of red fluff all over me and my apartment all week, and I just found a piece then. Anyway.
It's lovely.
Anyway, I digress. On the world's longest episode, I thought that was necessary to put in there.
This is Maggie.
Another one.
Okay, so from America, ice cream plus soda, usually root beer, becomes a root beer float.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it with anything other than root beer, but sounds interesting.
Oh my God, that's it. I love it.
Yeah.
Hi, Maggie. Thanks for
Little
speak
update.
piping in. Root beer float. That sounds better. Remember
Yeah.
I said root float, and I was like, that doesn't
Root
sound
float doesn't
right.
sound-
It's a
yeah,
root beer
yeah,
float.
root beer
well,
float.
Maggie, we'd love to blow your mind by
Yeah.
saying you can make a Fanta float.
Anytime
you
you
can make,
want.
Well, we'll
A
call it
Dr. Pepper
spider.
float?
Dr. Pepper float.
You could make a Dr. Pepper
Ooh,
float.
that would
That's
be-
very
Do you
American.
like Dr. Pepper?
I've only really had it once, I think. I kind of liked it.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's got such a bad rep.
Yeah.
I think it's yum.
Yeah, you think it's yum. Well, we should have it. We should have that. We should have a spider with
Dr. Pepper
Dr.
Spider.
Yeah.
To choose the end of this podcast.
That
All
was
right, so
really nice.
thank you for so much for those people.
We love those. We'll do some
Love them
emails next
so
week. There's lots of
much.
lovely emails as well coming through, and there's lots of other speak pipes as well. So I have to do some more next time.
Oh my God, I know
Yeah.
this episode has gone on so long. I'm so sorry. But I did oh my God, look at Dibs. Oh my
Oh,
God,
Dibs is so
he's got his
tired.
ears
He's so
upside
tired.
down. Talking about Dibs, will you take us out with a pet peeve, please? I said mine at the start.
Oh yeah, okay. What is my pet peeve for this week? I think when you're driving, and you're like you're like letting the person go, like you're kind of the pedestrian. You're just
yeah.
kind of going, yeah, go for it, go
Yep.
for it. And they get really confused by the whole situation and walk out a little bit and walk back and walk out a little bit and walk back. And
Is that
you're
where
kind of
you
going,
dance?
no, go. And they just keep kind of walking a little bit and walking back and walking it back and walking it. And it takes so much longer
I
than
could
if
have just
it's
not let you go.
Yeah,
I'd be on
yeah.
my way now.
Or when the pedestrian just kind of moves you along, just goes, no, I won't
Yeah, it's
accept
like, well,
that.
no,
I won't
hang
accept your
on,
kindness.
But now I am. So now if I start driving and if you step out, like
Yeah. I'm just bragging
think
I had my car back.
When you're such
that's
a
what I'm doing.
driver.
Yeah, I'm such a driver.
I think when I'm a driver, I hate pedestrians. When I'm a pedestrian, I hate
Yeah,
drivers.
yeah,
but
yeah.
no matter what I am, I hate cyclists.
yeah. Always. Thank you to Oliver Clark for doing the theme music.
And for the great
and for the
suggestion
great,
of the
we're going to do that
Winnebago
next week. Next week will be the Winnebago Man. And Tamsin Hayes for doing the artwork. Please do leave us a 5-star rating, 5-star review. It always helps get the podcast out there to as many people as possible.
And tell your friends.
Tell your friends. Please tell your friends. We love it when you tell your friends, because the more you support this podcast and get it out to people, the more we can do.
That's
We'd
right.
love that.
And if there were so many listeners that I didn't have to also have a full-time job, then if I was sick with the flu, I may have still been able to record,
that's
but
right.
I couldn't. Just too
Yeah,
much to do.
so
So if you guys
think
want
about
me
that.
to quit my job and do this full-time and not
Yeah.
get the flu somehow, that's on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's on you. Okay. Have a great week, guys.
Bye.